don't see.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another fun episode of Photoshop Party. And today is a day you don't want to miss. That's why there's so many people in the Zoom already. We have Miss Cheri Hammon, who is basically a lifetime artist. And I begged and pleaded and snivelled and whined so that she would come on and talk about presentation and talk about what looks good, what doesn't look good, color-wise, and all that good stuff. And if anybody can do it, that would be Miss Cheri. So without further ado, Miss Cheri, it's all yours.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me, Michael and Mel. If you're in Idaho, if you were at our convention last year, I did this program. That was the first time I did it. I was asked to kind of demystify how you choose a mat and all the fun stuff that goes along with it. And it's not just for competition prints. I mean, Dennis and I use this also for when we sell fine artwork as well. So it's more than just for competition, but especially for competition, it's a little bit more important if you want to get the merits and the loans and all that fun stuff. So I guess I will go ahead and share the screen and go to my presentation.
We have a screen.
Well, that's a good thing. Okay. At the top, it says, please move this window away from the shared. Oh, and now it's disappeared. Nope, it came back. What does that mean? At the top, it says, please move this window away from the shared application. And I can't move it.
I never have that window pop up, so I can't tell you.
And we don't
So
see it.
You don't
Cheri.
see it?
No, we do not.
Okay. Okay. Dennis is looking at it. See that thing right there? It says, oh, it'll come back in a second. And it's driving me crazy.
See all your thumbnails a second ago.
Yeah, no, I did change
Okay.
it. Okay, so I'm going to start, even though that thing is flashing at me. Presentation, the final touch. If anybody has ever entered print competition, I'm sure you've heard judges discussing various things about presentation. So I'm going to go over a whole bunch of stuff here. If Michael and Mel, if you can double check questions that we might have, and then I'll stop at certain intervals, and then we can try to address any questions that come up. Does that work?
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
If you can drop it into slideshow mode.
And thank you, Michael and Mel, again, for having me on your Photoshop parties. It's always a lot of fun to get to see everybody. Hold on.
You're
What?
on slideshow mode. Go back to your thing. You're showing all the thumbnails on the side.
I am in slideshow.
No, you're not.
Well, I was.
And this has powers. He can move from box to box.
Okay, there you go.
That's how it was.
No, it wasn't on my screen. It was showing this other screen.
So is it still in?
We're seeing the slides as well.
I can't change it. I'm
Okay.
in, according
We'll go
to
with
my
this.
thing, I'm in slideshow mode. Sorry.
Are you in presenter mode or slideshow mode?
I mean presenter mode, the one on the right.
Go into just straight slideshow. Play slides from beginning or from this slide.
I don't know where that is.
X this out.
Oh. Okay.
There you
Ta-da!
go.
Does that work? I
That
mean, I'm
Perfect.
still in.
That's okay. We'll take it.
Yep.
Okay.
That works for us right there.
Okay. Dennis and I are both members of PPA, and we're both certified. So thank you, PPA, for that. So, okay, presentation. What is it? Aside from one of the 12 elements of print competition, it is, according to the dictionary, an act of presenting or the state of being presented. It's what Mr. Webster tells us. Print presentation is one of the 12 elements. If you've ever listened to print competition, you know that this is one of the elements. It's kind of one of those that it can make or break an image, and then sometimes if it's done right, it kind of blends all together and helps out your image. And it's the element that we're talking about today. It is also the icing on the cake, the cherry on the top, and it's just the final touch. It's what you do to your image when you are done working on all of the retouching and any kind of adjustments. I've heard from a juror recently, and I like the quote. It said the presentation was really nice, and it was exquisitely tailored to the image. And I thought that was a very nice way of describing a presentation when it's done well. It isn't just an edge on an image. It's not one of the 12 elements just to make our lives harder. There's a reason for it. If you have a portrait business, or if you sell fine art, I'm sure everybody sells it in frames. Think of this mat or presentation on the image as kind of a frame that's going around your artwork. And there's several reasons why we do this. A frame on a piece of art, it's preservation, protection, separates it from the wall or whatever environment that it's in, and it helps follow through with the mood of the image and gives it a sense of design. And the biggest reason for me is it's complete, it's finished. It's the polishing touch before delivering to a client. So while we're not giving our print competition images to a client, we're giving it to jurors to judge and hopefully get merits in loan prints, or excuse me, we don't call it loan anymore, it's image excellence. Presentation on your images gives it a finished look. A lot of times if we're watching print competition and an image comes up and it doesn't have a presentation, it kind of looks like it's not finished. I don't know if anybody else has felt that way, but that's kind of how I feel when I see no presentation on an image. Just think of the presentation as a fence. It keeps your eye in the image, kind of like you have a fence around your yard to keep your kids and your animals in. It's the same for our eyes in an image. It's a visual and psychological barrier to hold you in the image if the presentation is done well. If it's not, it kind of goes to the presentation and then it defeats the purpose. A simple presentation is often the best. A busy or complicated presentation can distract the viewer, or in this case, a juror. The best presentations will enhance an image and not steal your eye away from it. And I promise I do have images coming up. I'm just kind of giving some groundwork here. This is one of my very first competition images back in the 90s. I started out as a retouch artist. I retouched negatives and prints and airbrushed for copy restoration back in the days when there was no Photoshop. This was a negative retouching entry, and this was my first ever experience with presentation, and I didn't even get to do it. When you retouch negatives, you retouch the negative, you send them the retouch negative, and you also send them a 8x10 before the negative was retouched so that they have something to go by, and they mount it all on a board. And that's how this all started for me. Just a little bit different, but this is my first loan print for PPA. Okay, we're going to discuss all types of different presentations. First, we're going to talk about your mat size. Are you going to do a thin mat or a thicker mat? So we're going to discuss that a little bit. Your mat size can give you a feeling of a sense of space and scale, small and large. Less border, which is going to be a thin mat, gives your image a feeling of large scale, like it's going to break out of that mat, makes it kind of appear to be bigger than it might. And this is an example of this. This is one of Dennis's. Huge scale, very large space. So giving it a little bit of a thinner mat keeps that mood. And here's another one. Some of my names have disappeared out of this slideshow and I don't remember who they are. This is the same thing. Now you notice the outside of the mat is a little bit longer. The right side and the left side is a little bit, there's more than the top and the bottom. This kind of gives it a little bit of an illusion that it's longer than it is, more slimline. It's kind of a trick to give us an optical illusion that it's wide. Now, more border, a wider mat, is going to give your image a sense of smallness. A lot of things where you might see this type of thicker mat on little bitty things like flowers, and the last one I saw recently was snails, just little minute things. And here's an example of that. This is a magnolia. It's not little, but I kind of wanted to give it a sense of it being smaller. And the white mat with the cut look kind of has the gallery museum type presentation, which Dennis and I really like, by the way, and use often. Here's another one, Russian thistle with a little fuzzy thing on it. It's kind of giving it a sense of smallness with the big wide mat. And here's an image, you might recognize this. This is a friend of mine, Sharon Fuente. This was on the cover of the PPA magazine sometime last year. And look at all that extra space. And then putting it at the bottom kind of gives it a sense that it's falling and that it's small with all the mat. Now we're getting it into black versus white versus color. This is a lot to think about when we are thinking about our presentations for our competition images. The presentation options widely vary and are often difficult to choose, which is why some who are new to image competition choose to just not do one. The whole process of choosing can be a little daunting if you don't have some guidelines. Remember, no matter what kind of mat that we do, it should enhance it and not distract. Distracting is something that you don't want to give the jurors, because they will, well, the jurors are instructed not to take off points really for presentation, but a lot of times it's just human nature. If you can't get away from a distracting mat or a distracting presentation, it's going to affect the score. It does happen. White mats. Dennis and I, like I mentioned earlier, Dennis and I use white mats a lot. A lot of jurors are still hesitant to use them or to score them well. And fortunately, the jurors are starting to get away with that, because this is what we see when we go to a museum or art shows or art galleries. We see white mats all the time. And so just sometimes it's very appropriate for an image. Sometimes it isn't, but more often than not, it can work very, very well. The white mats convey a fine art feeling because, like I said, they're used in art galleries and museums. When choosing a white mat for a higher key black and white, be sure it works with the image. Sometimes solid white works. Sometimes it needs to be a little bit more of a softer white. And I've got some examples coming up here in a minute to show you. If your image is high key and does not have any whites in it that contain 255, which is all the way white, a solid white matte may sometimes make your whites look dingy or dirty. And it's just going to really affect how it looks. Here's an example. This is one of mine. This is a solid white matte on the inside of this black and white tulip. And you can see the whites inside the image. They're not quite 255. So having this bright white, perfectly 255 matte makes it look kind of dingy. But I softened the white down, used it, just darkened it down just a touch. And look how much softer that looks. Now the whites in this image look a little bit more bright, a little bit more clean. So everybody, can you see the difference? I'll back up. Here's with the solid white. Here's with the solid, softer white. And I also added a texture. It's not much of a difference, but a little bit goes a long way. And here's one of Dennis's. Same thing. Here's a bright white matte. Here's a little bit of a softer matte. To me, both of the white and the dark shadows in the image look off with the super white matte. But when we go with the softer white, they both pop inside the image. It's not much, but it's just enough to really make the image look its best. White mattes are also great with mid to low key color and black and white images. So here's another choice. Here's one of Dennis's with a white matte. Another black and white with a white matte. Here's a color with a white matte. Another black and white. And a color. This looks like something that you would see in a big city art gallery. Here's another. Here's another color. Another black and white. White mattes work with brighter color images. They let us view images of bright colors cleanly and uncontaminated. And pretty much what that means is if we have a white matte with a brightly colored image, it's not going to affect the colors in the image. Like say, if we have a bright red flower and then we use a different colored matte, it could change our perception of that color that's in the image. And so using a white matte on a brightly colored image, we're not going to have that.
Cheri, there's a question. When you mention a softer matte referring to the white matte, are you adding a bit of gray to the white to make it softer?
Yes, that's the only way to make a white softer, is to tone it down.
Thank you.
And it's going to vary depending on your image. So that's something that you're going to have to play around with. And here's another brightly colored image with the white. A lot of times Dennis and I will find that using a white or a black matte sometimes is the only thing that works. We will have sat with our images for a while and played around with all these different options, and sometimes nothing works but a black or a white or a variation thereof. still on white mats. White mats are also great for abstracts, which is a lot of times mine and Dennis's go-to for abstract images. The judges, while they are judging an abstract type image, they're really going to be thinking about what they're seeing on the monitor or in print, if we ever go back to that. In introducing a mat that's kind of complicated is going to give them something else to think about. So when you're entering an abstract, it's best to keep it simple, just to keep the juror's eye on the image itself and not have to worry about anything else to look at. As you can see, all of these images work really well with white mats. Now on to black mats. Black mats can work with the low key, color, and black and white images as well, and for the same reasons as white. You're going to see the images uncontaminated, just like the white mats. It's just going to give us a little bit of a different mood. I would not suggest a black mat for super light images. We see them a lot in competition. And when Dennis and I are doing critiques, they just overpower the image and just too much weight, and it overwhelms the image. So just avoid black for mid to lighter key images. It's just overbearing on them. This is one of Dennis's. This is one of mine. And on this one, the black mat is the same black that's in the shadows. If I used a solid black mat on this, it would have made the image area look underexposed, and we're gonna show some of those in a minute. And you can see some variation in width size as well in some of these. This is one of Dennis's. The ones that aren't Dennis's or mine are friends that I got permission to use, but then some of the names have disappeared and I don't know why. And this one is mine. Black is also a good choice for abstracts, just like white is, and for the same exact reasons as for the white. And you can see that the black mats, while they work as well as white, just kind of give a different mood and a different feeling. And this is something that playing around with is going to help you decide. It all depends on the mood that you want to convey to the jurors. Here's a really nice one that had a black mat from Donald Chambers. When choosing a black mat for a black and white, be sure that you have good deep blacks in the image. If you have a solid black, which is going to read 0 in your info, it's going to give you an optical illusion that your image is underexposed. It may not be underexposed, but having a solid black 0 mat on it will make it look like it is. So in that case, just like the white mats, when we made a softer white mat, you need to make a softer black mat as well. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. Here's one of mine that I ended up choosing a little bit of a softer black. If you notice, the image area itself kind of looks a little weak. because there are no 0 blacks in the image. There's a few, but not enough to carry keeping the black matte. So I lightened the black matte a little bit. I mean, it's got a brown tone, but see how much stronger the image gets, how much richer it gets with a lighter matte. You go back and forth so you can see it again. And again, it doesn't take much, just a little bit that makes a huge difference. Here's another one with this dahlia. The black matte makes the greenery under the bloom look a little underexposed, but if I lighten the matte a little bit, it makes the whole image a little bit richer. Go back and forth so you can see. And this one again from Dennis, the gentleman, the black matte makes his hat look a little weak, but if we lighten that black just a little bit, it makes it richer. Go back and forth to see the difference. And it's all trickery, optical illusion. Okay, now for the fun part. We've gone through black mattes, white mattes, and now we're going to introduce color. And introducing color, it's a little difficult when trying to choose because you have a difference of color or the hue, how light or hard, how dark or how saturated. So there's more elements in choosing a color matte. This is the color wheel, of course. If anybody's ever taken art classes, they've seen this before. Any questions so far?
Nothing showing up.
Okay. I'm going to show you, and if you want to unmute yourselves, because I'm going to ask a question in a second. I'm going to show you 4 images, and I want you to look at them and tell me what are the 2 things in common about each of these in regard to the presentations. So I'm going to start. And I'll let you see these for a few seconds. Okay. Can anybody tell me what the 2 main things are?
One, the frame colors on the frame complement the image themselves.
I'd say they're taken right out of the image.
I see very similar colors on the border as well as the image, very similar.
They're
Similar tones.
harmonious with the image. They're near each other on the color wheel.
Very good.
For the record, I said it first.
The mattes all have the same color or hue and the same values that are present in the image. So why does this work? Anybody?
Complements the actual photo.
They're
It
analogous colors.
doesn't compete with the,
There is a word I am looking for.
it doesn't compete with the image.
Analysis. Analogous.
You got it.
Whatever that word.
Analogous.
Analogous colors. And what are analogous colors?
Complementary? Yeah.
Analogous colors are colors that are grouped together right next to each other on the color wheel. It's generally 3 colors. Sometimes it can go past that. As you can see here, on the right one shows the analogous colors. And the next slide, I've got these two color slides right next to each other. The term analogous refers to having analogy or corresponding to something in particular. And here are the 2 next to each other. The right side of this shows different groupings of analogous colors. And you can see that you can shift one maybe either direction and it would still work. Okay, we're going to look at those same 4 images with the analogous colors up. Which group would you put this image in?
Violets.
Violet.
Violet or red violet?
Or blue violet?
I go red violet.
There's a little bit of all of them, and that's what I was talking about when it can shift 1 or maybe 2 either direction.
Or blue violet. Ooh.
Yellow, orange to orange.
Blue, green?
Blue, yellow. Yeah, blue, green.
This one's kind of between orange and red orange, even though there's a little bit of mauve in there. Okay, I heard recently, someone told me after they entered a competition or a few competition images that they used complementary colors as their map. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, why would anybody say that? So can I use a complementary color to the predominant color in my image, which is opposite on the color wheel? I would not personally, because complementary colors, which are opposite on the cover wheel, make each other the strongest that they can be. They create more contrast when they are together and will fight hard for your attention, both of them, even if they are less saturated or a different value. When you've got 2 complementary colors together, it creates drama and each image is strong. So I would stay away from complementary colors when thinking about presentations. So we're going to take a look at those same images again with the complementary color at the value that the original was. Yay or nay?
Oh,
Yuck.
gosh, no.
Yuck.
Yuck.
Nay.
Does
Nay
not work.
and nay.
Okay, I think we've answered that question, don't you think?
Those were great.
The biggest concern from those last 4 are that the presentation distract from the image. They do not enhance it. So that's a complete failure. So don't use complementary colors on your mat. Luckily, the person that told me that has learned the error of their ways and will never do that again. Okay, if black or white or color wasn't difficult enough, we're going to make it crazier with trying to decide between all 3 for particular images. It's easier for black and white. It's either black or it's white or a variation thereof for the presentation. I would personally not recommend using a color presentation for black and white. For color images, sometimes they can all work, which makes deciding a little bit more difficult. We just have to decide what's appropriate for each image. All 3 of these work. The one that I used in competition was the far left. The one on the right is what I used for my ASP portfolio. So they both work. All 3 of these work as well for this particular image. The one I competed with was the one in the middle. The one I used for my ASP portfolio was the one on the right. The yellow would work as well. Here's another one. They all three work. The one I competed with was the black. This is one of Dennis's. It's not a competition image, but it was a family portrait. All of these work as well. Just got to decide the mood and what you want to convey in the image. Now we're going to talk about the part of the presentation that a lot of times people have a hard time grasping. Cut matte versus keystrokes or key lines versus deckled edge versus all kinds of stuff, and sometimes all three, which sometimes can get a little crazy. So for years, print competition has seen changes in presentations. If you've been entering print competition for a long time, you can remember back to the days when presentations went from full bleed to colored tape and real hand cut mats and deckled edges on paper. And remember the tape that we used for keystrokes, little bitty skinny thin tape that you put around an image, kind of like the keystrokes on our digital images. And now we still have those, but we've also added the digital borders or the digital mats, the digital cut look mats, digital deckled edges, and keystrokes. And a lot of times this is just personal choice. They all have their place. They all work. So just deciding how you want it to look is completely up to you. If you are still new to this, I would stay away from anything complicated until you get the hang of it. Keeping it simple is always good. This one is just a simple white mat with a keystroke. Now, the keystroke, you want it be big enough so you can see, but you don't want it so wide that it's a distraction from the image. And I can't give you how many points to make your keystroke because it's going to be different depending on the resolution of your image. The lower the resolution, a 1 point keystroke is gonna look a little wide, as opposed to a 1 stroke keystroke on a much larger file is gonna appear a lot thinner. So it's something you're gonna have to play with depending on the resolution of your image. And this is the cut matte look. This is if you will email me, I put my email, I think it's the very first thing in the chat window. I have a PDF on how to create these cut matte look mats. So if you email me, I will send you the PDF. And also, if you can see on the inside of the image, there's a tiny little keystroke around the image just to separate it a little bit from the background, because some of the same tones in that image are in that pinkish matte. So it's kind of just to create a little bit of separation so it doesn't bleed into the matte in a few places. And when I entered this particular image, it was an actual print, and I deckled, I did the deckled edge on the print. This is a digital matte just because I couldn't get my hands on the actual print to photograph it. But this also contains a cut matte. So the print itself, or the image area itself, depending on if it's all digital or if it's print, has the deckled edge look inside a cut matte. And we see a lot of this in the fine art world. And we have not forgotten about the artist category. So we're going to give the artist category some love too. This category requires the maker to have thumbnails of before images or elements in a composite on the presentation itself. And a lot of people have gotten super creative with the presentation for these as well. Just as in the photo, and just as in the photographic open, all the options that we just saw, the presentations are going to vary in this category as well. This one is mine. It has a deckled edge on the image area, as well as a cut matte look. And then for my before image, it's just a little thumbnail at the bottom. It didn't have the cut matte look. I wanted more of the emphasis to be on the image area itself. And here's another one with only a keystroke and just the simple thumbnail with no presentation around the thumbnail. And this is one of Kimberly Smith. If you're familiar with her work, she does absolutely beautiful illustrative work and also in the artist category. She has a combination of several cut mats, a float cut mat, and then also deckled edge image area as well. And the before images on the bottom have the same treatment. So she's gone a little bit above and beyond just keystrokes or cut mats. It's very three-dimensional looking. And here's another one with a wide cut mat for the image area and for the before elements as well. Here's another one with just keystrokes around the image area and all the elements. And now we're going to get into what not to do. I have asked the permission of all these that I have that were brave enough to share with me to put into this program. When I first started putting this together, I'm thinking, who is going to let me use their images that had less than appropriate presentations for their images? So, but they were very generous in letting me use them. This first one, have your sunglasses ready. What you think about that one?
Wow.
Ouch.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Certainly stands out.
This one is actually mine back in the time when using the image itself as the background. Helen Yancey, all those who are in the print competition world know and love Helen Yancey. She finally just kind of stood up during a competition at once and during a critique. It wasn't during the competition itself. She said, just stop it.
Oops.
Here's another one of mine, way back in the days of knowing you have all these things to do, but shouldn't do. I actually had one judge that liked it, said it was whimsical and it went with the image. So I had one fan for this type of look, but I wouldn't do this again. Here's another one of mine. The bold color, the bright matte, is pretty much the killer of this image. Next time I submitted it, I did white and it did much better.
Don't forget the inner bevel.
And then this one, there for a while, there were jurors that were suggesting that if you use negative space in your entry, that you should bring elements of the presentation out into that negative space. And that's what I did from this. And no, we don't want to do this. This is just, it hurts my eyeballs. So don't do this either. This is another one that's using complementary colors, even though it is not the same value as the blue. This yellow matte just did not quite work with this image. And so this is an example of what not to do. Remember, we were talking about using complementary colors and how we shouldn't do that. And here's another one. While there is blue in the image, the sky is a warm blue, but the matte is a bright, more saturated, cool blue, and they kind of clash. So I would definitely stay away from that as well. And I did not do this, but I couldn't find any readily available images that where I high key black and white using a black matte. So this is why you don't. It just overwhelms the delicate nature of the high key black and white. And this one also competed with a white matte and just added the black to show you how it's just way too heavy for it. Now there's several images that are coming up here from different photographer friends that have competed over the last several years that I really love their presentation. Just enjoy and get inspiration and ideas from these. It's a beautiful one from Sandra Pierce with the deckled edge and the cut matte look. One from Tamara Knight. Look how creative this is with all of the different borders and borders going into the image going into the presentation area. It kind of turns the presentation into including it in the art piece itself. So it becomes part of the art piece and not just the matte for it. Cut matte look with a deckled edge. And this is one from Kara Nakamura. She does beautiful flowers and butterflies and hummingbirds and things like that. This is another case where the presentation has become part of the art piece itself. One from Kathy Weirda. She uses this this presentation a lot where it's kind of stacked mats. And you can see a little bit of a drop shadow underneath the image area and that middle matte area, which kind of gives it a little bit of a 3D look. And the Simones, this is a case where they actually used the image area as part of the presentation. But if you notice, it's a continuation of the image. It isn't made bigger. So it's also very muted. So it doesn't jump out at you. It just adds a little bit of interest. Another one from Karen using the presentation as part of the art piece. And also notice that under the orchids at the bottom, there's a shadow under them as if they're actually coming out of the image area and casting a shadow on the mat. And this is another image where using the image area itself as the mat works. It doesn't always work, but it can. Just has to be done well. And you can see it's a little bit more out of focus and lighter than the actual image area itself. This is one from Randy McNeely, and he uses these a lot. I remember seeing this at the print display. If you've done framing for portrait or other work, the little inset in the middle is called a fillet. And he actually had a fillet inside an actual cut mat. And it's really, really nice. And it adds a lot of elegance and beauty to the presentation itself. And here's another one from Kathy Weirda using that same technique. Oh, I already have that one. We'll skip that one. Now, I thought this one was really interesting. It kind of looks like a fillet, and then it also kind of looks like a postage stamp. Very, very different. And the matte appears to be the same texture and color as the image itself, but look how the bright colors really jump off of that presentation and out of that image. Another one from Nancy Emmerich with a keystroke and kind of a stacking matte look. And this is for an album. I haven't talked much about albums, but I thought this presentation for this one particular page was really nice and clean and classic for a album presentation. And another one from Kira Nakamura with a really, really pretty presentation. This one is a deckled edge, but they went in with paint and painted out the white part a little bit warmer tones that are in the image so that the white didn't stand out so much, along with it being on a linen inset with a cut matte look. So some really creative options here. And also we're usually sponsored by ACI. I didn't take the slide out. I mean, we're not doing anything with ACI, but Dennis and I both have backgrounds with Background Town. And thank you very, very much for having me today. Here is all my contact information, website, email, phone number, Facebook, Instagram. If you want to follow, I'll follow you back. Are there any questions?
There are a couple of questions coming up.
Okay.
Are there any do's and don'ts for using texture in your presentation?
Yes. As you can see on this slide here, that is about as textured as I get. It's enough to see it, but not too much that it distracts. If you have a whole lot of texture in your image, it's going to be a little overpowering. But at the same time, I'm not a huge fan of a solid color unless it's black or white. I like a little bit of texture. It just kind of breaks up the solid nature and gives it a little bit more softness. It just my feelings anyway. Hope that helps.
Okay, and the second question is, how do you make the torn paper or the deckled edge look?
That's kind of a long drawn out process for another time.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? Going once, going twice.